What's going on, everybody? It's Carmine from Bar Mind Tech, and today we're going to be talking about different ways that you can start a home lab. So I've made videos in the past covering some ways to start a home lab and some things I wish everybody knew when they started a home lab, but today we're going to go over a few different ways that you could really get the home lab going, what you need, and how you can start it off. So we're going to be talking about Oracle's VirtualBox, which is a virtualizer that you can make different computers in. You can make virtual machines so you could practice certain skills and whatever, and you could build it out and run it virtually off this hypervisor that runs off of a main PC. So we'll go into that more detail in a little bit. We're going to talk about using some SBCs. So I have a Zima board. It was upside down. I have a Zima board. I have a Raspberry Pi. So we'll talk about these. We'll also go over making like a full-blown Proxmox server, either on a mini PC or another PC. So let's get right into it. So the first one we'll talk about is Oracle's VirtualBox. This is a program that I've used in school for years, and it's also something that I used before I really had a server and a whole home lab built out. What this is a virtualizer that runs off a main PC. So I'm pretty sure it supports Mac as well, but you would run, yeah, here we go. Presently runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac. You would install this program, and then from there you can create virtual machines off of it. So this is just the download site. It has some information if you need, but it's really straightforward. And then when you get it running, you would have something like this. So this is what the VirtualBox Manager actually looks like. It's a very simple thing, but you can see over here we can have different VMs. So I can come over here and I can create a VM, and you could build it out with an ISO image and whatever else. You could also sometimes be given OVAs or VDI files, and then you could build out VMs from there. So that's something that I actually had to do a lot for school this semester. It took a penetration testing class, and we'd be given challenge VMs. So the professor would give me an OVA file, and I would just put it into VirtualBox, and then I'd be able to spin it up and access my machine. But other than that, if you want to practice on Linux, you can make a Linux machine. You can see down here I actually have a Kali Linux machine. If you want to work on Windows Server, I actually did that at one point. I was taking like an online class from YouTube. There was like this person had a playlist that was how to learn Active Directory and stuff like that, and I built out a Windows server. I had it as a domain controller. I made hosts to go off of it to be users to the domain controller, and I did it all out of VirtualBox, and it runs off your main machine. The one thing to keep in mind if you're going to run with the VirtualBox method is it's going to use the resources from your host machine. So if you're going to give you want to give your machine, your VM, 12 gigs of RAM, your machine needs to have more than 12 gigs of RAM because it's got to be able to support it. That's the only thing to keep in mind. So like for me, I built out my workstation a while ago, and I gave myself 32 gigs of RAM. Here it is. Yeah, I have 32 gigs of RAM. So when I work in VirtualBox, I'm able to give a machine 8 gigs of RAM and not really worry. But if you're running off like a laptop or something similar, you just want to keep that in mind. You might not be able to allocate all the memory that it needs or CPU cores because it is going to use the host system's resources. Which now I'm not saying is a bad thing. I do think VirtualBox is a great program to use, and like I said, I've used it for years. I used it to learn Linux originally. I got my first touch on Linux through VirtualBox, and a lot of my other projects were originally through VirtualBox because I didn't have a home lab to test in. So I really did like VirtualBox in the beginning. You just got to make sure that you have a computer that could run it, or the VMs you're going to make aren't going to be using too much resources for what it can handle. The VirtualBox is a really good way, but it's not a permanent solution because the computer it runs on has to be on for the virtual machines to run. So if you turn your workstation off every night, the virtual machines go off too. So VirtualBox is a good way to, I feel, kind of get the practice. You can mess with stuff, but it's not really a good way to run like home lab services like a Plex server or Docker or anything else you might need. But the VirtualBox is a really good way to get the practice, and then you can move over to something else. The next thing we're going to be talking about is using SBCs like a Zima board or Raspberry Pi. So I do have both of those here. Here's a Zima board. We did a bunch of videos on this, so if you're interested, I'll make a playlist and I'll put that below. I also have a Raspberry Pi. This is a 3B, I believe. These are what I really started all of my home labbing on back in like 27. Let's see. I think 2018. It was before I went away to college. I got my first Raspberry Pi and I made a media server off of it. It wasn't good. I had no idea what I was doing, but that's how I learned Linux. So if you're not familiar, these Raspberry Pis in the beginning used an OS called Raspbian, which has now been replaced with Raspberry Pi OS or Raspberry Pi, I think whatever else. But Raspbian was a Linux distro that was used to run on Raspberry Pi. You could have a desktop version, or you could have a light version, which was just a command line, so it mimicked an Ubuntu or an Ubuntu server machine. And this is how I learned all my Linux commands, because I knew nothing. So when I got one of these, I had to learn how to use it. So I watched videos and all this other stuff, and I broke stuff and redid it. And these are how I really started practicing my Linux commands. I still really didn't know a lot, but I knew enough to get me through. So with these, I made, like I said, a little media server. I also from there made like a NAS, which I've had done a video on. Like I said, I'll make a playlist and I'll just put the whole thing in the description so you guys could see everything. I also made a VPN project off of it, so like I could VPN back to my house, because this was when I actually came home when I was going to a commuter school. So going back and forth to school, I wanted to be able to access my house so I could hit my file share. So I made a VPN, and that's how I would do it. So I never really saved anything on my local laptop. I was always worried about something dying. So I figured if I have a file share at home, I could just keep accessing that, and at least it's centrally located. So I did something like that. So I ran a VPN, and then I ran a file. So let me show you the other one I was using. I would also use one of these. So this is a Raspberry Pi Zero. So this is just a smaller version of the full-size board that I was just showing you guys. It has less resources, but this was perfect. And this is actually what I ran my VPN server off of for a while. So with Pi-hole, it also works with PiVPN. I've done videos on that stuff too. You could run a VPN and Pi-hole off of it. So I used to do this, and the funny thing was I used to run this PiVPN, but I didn't understand about port forwarding or open up ports in the firewall. So I used to make out this VPN every time on this on the Pi-hole, and it would never work. I would never be able to connect back, and I didn't understand why. Years later, when I started to really learn networking, that's when I learned it's because I didn't open up the port on my firewall. But that was a learning experience, and that's how I did all this. But these SBCs, like these Raspberry Pis, these were like my bread and butter back in the day. Like this is how I learned all of my skills. This is how I learned like my basic home networking and everything else. I learned how to use SSH, all the command line stuff. Like I learned a lot of stuff off of these. And I'll forever think that these are some of the most valuable projects I worked on. I also worked with the Zima board for a while. I did a bunch of videos on this. I think this is a great tool. It's a simple HomeLab server, but it really could run a lot of stuff off of it. They run CasaOS by default, and in there you really have a lot of options that you could play with. It has a large amount of Docker support, so you can really just deploy any Docker container you want. And depending on the model you get, whether it's the lower RAM, higher RAM with more CPU cores, you really can run a lot of stuff. The one that I have here was the 8 gig RAM. I think it has 4 cores. And I was able to run a Proxmox server off of this and a couple of different VMs and stuff like that. So I'll have a playlist for that too. You can check this out for the Zima board series. But these were definitely cool boards to get. The Zima Blade replaced this, and that's where they were able to have, you know, more add-ons for more RAM and stuff like that. Everything on this one was soldered in, so you really didn't have much to play with. But what was really nice was there's 2 NICs on this. So you can make a firewall, a router, whatever you want out of this, or other projects too. But yeah, so the SBCs are definitely cool, especially if you're trying to work with a budget. Like the Raspberry Pis, I know now the Pi 4s are like $80 to $100, or Pi 5s I think are out now. But back when I was starting, these Raspberry Pi 3s were like $30, and the Zeros were like 10, I think. So for a quick project to learn on, these were great because it was cheap and it uses barely any power. Even the Zima board, I think the highest model is like $150 or $180. That's great to learn on because you could really deploy a lot of stuff and you could actually start running some services in your house off of this. That's enough about the SBCs. Now let's move over to the next one. We're talking about getting like a physical machine to actually run a server off of. So I'm going to go over to eBay. I'm going to show you some of the options of stuff that I've checked out or I use for my server. So over here on eBay, and now I've actually did a video maybe about a month or so ago actually talking about the Elite Desk 800 G4. This is a mini PC that I've actually migrated over my entire HomeLab over to, and I turned off my old tower server and I run everything off of one of these mini PCs. I have one with an i7 and then I upgraded the RAM so it has 32 gigs of RAM and then I put a 2 terabyte NVMe drive in it. These PCs support multiple drives and expanded RAM, and with an i7 it really gave me a lot of expandability and the power I needed to run my server. The plan is if I ever need to expand again, I'm just going to get another one of these mini PCs because they sip power. At idle, it uses maybe 10 watts, and under load, it goes up to about 30 or 40. Compared to my old server that used about over 100 watts of power, I think the TDP of my two Xeon chips I had in there were about 77 or 80 each. So using a mini PC is really a game changer for me. Personally, I love these mini PCs because you can set them up, tuck them away in the corner, and they have everything that you can run off of it. It uses barely any power, and you don't even have to think about it. So you can see there's a lot of options on eBay. Even these small form factor ones are a really good option. My friend actually just got one of these, and it has like 4 drive bays. It has plenty of room, so you really could play with these and get something going off of it. But these PCs are perfect because you can run Proxmox on it, or if you want to just do a regular Linux machine and work off of that, you can. But what I really like is you can come over here and you can, if you really spend some time on it, you can find a nice mini PC for $50 to $70. These are just the HPs, but if I do like a Dell mini PC, we can find some of the ProDesks, I think they're called, or the Optiplexes, sorry. You can find some of these for a really nice price too. Some of them have no power cord, so you do need to take a look. I recommend trying to find one that has everything in it, but if you want to, try to find the power cord on the side, you can if you find a really good deal on eBay, or even Marketplace will have a lot of good stuff. A lot of people are just trying to be getting rid of their computers and sell them dirt cheap. But you could scout out eBay or Marketplace or wherever you might, have near you that you could buy stuff. And you could usually find one of these mini PCs or a small form factor PC relatively cheap, and you could really start building a home lab off of it. Now, the biggest thing to keep in mind if you're going to go this route and buy hardware is you don't want to buy something that's really old. I know it's going to be a really good price, and that's going to be really attractive when it comes to looking at getting that. And it might have, more RAM or more cores, but at the end of the day, the older hardware is going to have less support, and it's going to use a lot more power. So it's something you got to keep in mind in the long run. If you're somebody like me, you probably keep your home lab on 24/7. So all my stuff runs all the time. It uses a lot of power when you leave it running all the time. Luckily, I don't pay the electric bill, but I know my dad does, and he is not thrilled when I used to use a ton of power. So that's why downsizing was really important to me. But it's also the point of you want something that's going to be quiet and something that's not going to be a nuisance. Of course, you can go get an enterprise server. You can find an old like R570 or something for a couple $100. That's going to have a ton of RAM, a whole bunch of CPU cores, stuff like that. But it's going to use a ton of power, and it's going to be super loud, and it's going to generate a ton of heat. So I actually have one of those, and me and my friend tucked it away somewhere else. And we're glad it is, because it was not something we could run at our houses because it's so loud and it just is going to use so much power. So yeah, you could do it if you want to. If you have the room or power's really cheap by you, you don't mind. You want to tuck into your garage because your garage is cold all the time. You could use it to heat the garage, I guess. But running one of those big enterprise servers is really not the best option. Even my buddy Don at Nova Spirit, he had one, and he actually decommissioned it to run everything off a Raspberry Pi for the most part. So we'll talk about that a little bit more too, but I would just try to stay more focused on like regular sized PCs. There's a lot of consumer grade machines that you can run that'll have the power needed to actually run a home lab server. I also have tutorials on how to set up Proxmox and going over the mini PCs and everything else. So like I said, I'll just have a bunch of links, and I'll have a couple playlists up in the description so you can check out some of the other videos. I'll have some links and playlists in the description with videos and stuff that go over the different projects that I've built out, whether it's on the Zima board, Raspberry Pis, the new mini PC I'm using, all this stuff like Proxmox installs. I'll have a whole bunch of links below, so you can take a look at it and you can really figure out, where you might want to go with your setup. Like I said, if you're really going to stick with it and run services and like a Plex server or Dock or anything else, you're probably going to want to get like at least a mini PC to start with. And for $75 for like an initial investment, it's pretty good because you're going to learn a lot of skills from it. So it's definitely a good option to check out. But that's really that. I would say those are like 3 best options to start a home lab in 2024 right now. Especially if you're worried about price or anything else. These are 3 different tiers of all different price ranges of how you can start learning home lab skills and practicing different skills in the lab. So hopefully better yourself for your career or anything else you might want to do, or maybe you just want to play around and IT interests you a little bit. So that's that, and that's how I'd say get started. On a side note, aside from the content from today's video, I do want to bring something up to everybody. If you're not familiar, Don over at Nova Spirit Tech made a video last week making a formal announcement about his cancer diagnosis. Don is a dear friend of mine, and I used to actually work with him. He's the reason I started this YouTube channel, so it's a very sincere thing to me. I would really appreciate if you guys could go over and check out his channel. Currently, he doesn't have like a GoFundMe going or anything like that, but he does have YouTube memberships, he has a Patreon, and he has a merch store that he has links in his videos to. I would really appreciate if you guys can go over and check out some of his videos, just leave them playing to help go through. Currently, YouTube is his main job. That's what he's doing to support his family and everything else. So if you guys can go check out some of his videos and just let them play in the background so we can help him out. Like I said, Don's a dear friend of mine, and I wish him all the best. So let's all just help him out as a community, because he's the reason we have Barmind Tech. So I just want to say that as a quick side note. Other than that, I want to thank everybody for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And maybe check out some of my other videos. Like I said, I'll have links below to some playlists and other stuff. I'll also have links to all the hardware I use and gear I use in my home lab, as well as a link to my Discord server if you guys want to check that out. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.